Hello again. This is going to be a brief one-part video that answers a question that showed up in the Q&A section, which is, what tool do I use to remove carbon from a rim? Now, it'd have to be a smooth pipe, of course. This won't work on a sandblast or a rusticated pipe. But there actually is something that works quite well, but you can't buy it. You have to make it. But it costs effectively nothing, or so little, might as well be nothing. And you can make one in a few minutes. But anyway, this is it. And what exactly are we dealing with here? It is a type of tool steel. You can't make this out of like brass or aluminum or something like that. It won't work for long. It's got to be razor sharp, and it started out, and you can get these at any average hardware store. It's nothing more or less than the corner of one of these what do they call it, drywall application tools. They're made of spring steel. Some of them are stainless steel. It's actually what you make a knife blade out of. Now, you could make this scraper tool out of a knife blade, but it's far easier to deal with, to both fabricate and to use, if it's parallel sided, and knives tend to be a wedge in profile. So I wouldn't mess with a knife blade, although you could if you really wanted to. Cutting the corner off of one of those scraper things, one of those drywall knives, is a bit of a project. You'll burn through several hacksaw blades, but it can be done with a hacksaw. Better and easier to use what's called an angle grinder, but you can figure it out. Also, the size of this thing is actually important. You don't want it too big. If it's too large, you'll get too much leverage, and you won't have the degree of touch that you want. And if you get too much leverage, you'll push too hard, and you'll dig and can scratch the wood and dig holes and stuff in it. And if it's too small, if you just make it a little tiny thing, then you won't have enough surface area to grab to have good control. So I played with these over the years and came up with this size as being optimal. And it's 1.5 inches long and just over, well, let's see, about 5/8 of an inch on the base there. So something approximately that size is what you want. And how you use it, two parts. After you grind the edge absolutely perfectly dead square, meaning you're not going to find a razor sharp square edge on something like this unless you put it there yourself. And you can do that on like a disc sander, or you could do it by hand if you're patient, and on sandpaper. Now, I just use a tabletop, but I don't want to move the camera around and all that, so I've got a block of wood here to demonstrate, but this would work just fine. And holding the fat end between, I find it most comfortable using a middle finger and thumb, and then applying pressure with my index finger. And this is both how you would grind it in the first place and how you polish it, like stropping a straight razor that you would shave with. And you follow, I don't know if the camera allows you to see, I'm actually rocking this slightly. The barrel distortion on lenses makes things like that look a little weird or invisible, one or the other. But I'm holding it at exact right angles and putting moderate pressure on it and just going along. This is 1200 paper, and you don't want to use anything more coarse than that, because if you get scratches in that edge, they will leave lines on the subject, on the pipe, and it'll look like you sanded it, and you don't want that. If you get one of these things sharp enough, now it's a 90-degree edge, but that's a scraper's edge. It's not a, you don't want a wire bead. You don't want a knife edge, you want a 90-degree edge that's as fine as you can make it. And how you use it then is you hold the fat end, and you're going to go about 45 degrees to the surface. Don't use it straight up and down, it'll just chatter. And if you hold it too flat, it's just going to slide. But around 45 degrees, and magic happens. And with the proper delicate touch, you can actually remove the finish of a pipe without getting into the color layer. You can see the carbon starting to come off, and the darkened area there where the heat has darkened the finish, if you start getting corrugations, little parallel lines, turn the work a few degrees so that you attack at a slightly different angle and just continue. And you work your way around. Now when you're down to the color layer, at that point you've done all you can do without refinishing. In other words, if you continue to see a darkness, that's the wood itself has changed color from use. And the carbon is gone, and if you want to get newer looking than that, like refinish time, then you actually have to top the pipe, but that's a different subject. We're just trying to get the carbon off, and this is how I do it on my own stuff, on pipes people send me. I've been doing it this way for 20 years. Works like a champ. And it's also useful in one other case where from time to time you'll get a pipe that has shiny patches on it. A smooth pipe that looks normal in every regard, but as it ages, as you smoke it, there's areas that are usually about the size of a fingerprint here and there, and sometimes tucked in the corners, that stay much shinier than the rest of the pipe. And what that is at the factories, or whoever made it, used shellac to set the color and kind of freeze. You know, it's a finishing material, and they put it on in very thin coats, and it's so thin, in fact, that as you smoke it and use it, it'll wear away, but doesn't wear away evenly, and it'll leave these shiny patches behind. And if you try to buff them off, you just shine them more, and you'll actually wear the wood down. You'll erode the wood around the shiny patch, and it makes the problem worse. But if you take one of these guys and just this light touch, 45 degrees, and you just go like this. Now I'm not actually working on one here because I couldn't find a specimen that is that, but all you do though is this, and it'll flake right off. You can actually, if you want to, take the finish, a clear coat finish, entirely off a pipe without leaving a bunch of streaks and sanding marks and all that, using one of these silly little things. Now it takes some practice. You can't just, you'll learn the hard way if you push too hard or whatever. So I strongly recommend you practice on a pipe where you have a fallback option. If you screw it up, you can refinish it or something. Don't start out doing this on your best specimens, but it doesn't take that long to do it, because you're watching the result as you go, so that you know if it needs a little more pressure or a little more angle. Don't look at the tool and don't look at your hand, look at the result it leaves behind. And you keep the sandpaper handy, and after every 5 minutes or so, give it a few more strops like a razor, and it'll stay so sharp that you'd have to get a microscope to see that edge. It will cut you, but not like a normal knife blade because it's so obtuse in angle. It's 90 degrees in angle. Anyway, that's it. Now I got all covered with carbon, but so it goes. Pipe repair is not the cleanest thing in the world to do. So that's it. And I'm gonna, there's a do-it-yourself volume on this channel, and I'll start whenever I make one of these little toss-off quickie videos of tool types. I'll pile them all up in that one spot. So there you go. Take care.